Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you're coming from. Hope you all are doing well. Hey, happy Sunday, if it's still Sunday for you. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into office hours, chill office hours. That means we need a little bit of music in the background, just ever so faintly in the background. There we go. Happy Sunday, everyone. Hope you all are doing well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hey, look at us go. All right, so today is office hours. If you're new around these parts, we do a 30-week software engineering boot camp where we go from zero skills to employed. And so we are sailing through HTML, CSS, and now JavaScript. And on Sundays, we like to take a few bit of time to work through past work, to answer all of your questions. So if you have questions, you can share them in the chat. I try to keep an eye on that, but if you want your question to be answered, we share out the Slido 30 minutes before class. It always goes out first on the newsletter and then on our Discord, !Discord in chat. But if you have questions, you can throw them into the Slido still, !ask, and we'll get through them as many as we can. Alrighty, folks. Dio, I'm doing good. Taking a break for office hours. Hey, I'll take it. So today's gonna be a little bit shorter. I need a little bit more time this afternoon, so I don't have the time to do a full office hours. So we're gonna do a power hour. We're gonna go through some past homework for a little bit. We're going to look at some of the code that was assigned on Thursday, and then we're going to get through as many questions as we can. So we're going to do a power hour. That's what we're going to do today. Cool. I do want to do like a full session where we go through a bunch of layouts, but I need like 3-4 hours to do that, and I don't have that today. So I want to make sure that we get that done. So that's probably going to be next Sunday, so that we can have the full time to do it, but I just don't have that time today. So we're going to do a power hour. We're going to go through some Slido questions. We're going to look at some of the JavaScript. We're going to maybe do the thing that was assigned a little bit for homework, and then we'll get into more questions. Cool. We need the time for coding anyway. That's what I like to hear. Yeah. Alrighty, let's get into it. Let's do a few questions off the rip. Let's take a look. All right, first question of the day on Slido is, how do you list your new coding skills and network on LinkedIn when your current job is in a different industry and you don't want your coworkers and employers to know? So here's the thing. You don't have to. All right, you don't have to, right? Some folks really won't put anything on their LinkedIn until they're really into the hunt, right? They might not put anything until they start like actively applying to jobs, right? And so that's something that some people will do. The other thing that I recommend is to start crafting your story and then figure out how coding fits into that story. If you are, let's say, a waiter at a restaurant, right? You're a waiter at a restaurant, right? Server at a restaurant, and you wanted to start learning how to code. You might start putting on your LinkedIn like things about hating POS systems, right? And then your engineering skills are to help fix the POS system at work. And so if your employer was to ask, or your coworkers were to ask, right, you could commiserate with them and say, I hate this point of sale system. I think I could maybe write some code that would make it better. So I have this hobby that I've been exploring, which is coding, because I want to see if I can make our systems better, right? And so now your boss, and as long as they're not like a horrible boss, right, and feel threatened by people trying to do better, you can start to squeeze in your coding in a way that reflects positive like change for the org, right? Like you can be like, these skills are going to help me in my current job. It's not that I'm going to get a better job or a different job. It's just that I want these skills to help the job that I'm currently at, right? And so there's a way to do that for whatever your role is, right? To be able to say, hey, like these are skills I think I've been wanting to pick up as a hobby, and I think they could actually really help here on this job. And then that like 99% of the time alleviates the concerns, and you don't have to go all in on like all the bells and whistles on LinkedIn until you're closer to the job hunt. That's how what I typically recommend to folks. Now, some people just have really like persnickety bosses, and you got to be a little bit more coy than that, but that's typically a good way to get started. Look at this next one. How do you explain very large gaps, years in your resume when you have nothing to show for the supposed freelancing you've been doing during that gap? So here, our advice for folks that have large gaps on their resume is that you are freelancing during that time. Now, here's the thing. When you are applying to jobs, it's all about passing a sniff test. Now, a lot of folks that have tried to apply in the past with large gaps in their resumes and they haven't been successful weren't really applying right. You need a well-crafted story that makes it believable for you to be showing up during that day. And then you need to fill in facts that make that story believable. And so you need to be freelancing. Our class on Tuesday is a how to freelance class. Your requirements for this bootcamp is to get a paid client, right? And so you will have paid clients by the end of this program, so that when you show up to an employer and they look at a gap in your resume and they see that you are freelancing, it's not just that you have the freelancing, it's that you have a literal client that they can go and talk to, that they can see your code, that they can see what's live, right? And so the way you get around the freelancing bit is by literally freelancing. And as long as you have one or two like reference clients, that's what you call them reference clients, then it doesn't matter how big the gap is, right? They're not going to want to talk to every single client you ever worked with. And you can say, sorry, I have NDAs and a bunch of other stuff. Here are my two reference clients for you to talk through, right? And so the idea here is that it's a numbers game and it's a sniff test. You want to show up in that interview and say, yeah, from 2000 to 2010, I was doing this thing. I really started to learn how to code. And then from 2010 to now, I've been freelancing and working with a wide array of clients, utilizing my past experience and my engineering skills to deliver solutions for their business problems. Here are two reference clients that I have. Normally my clients are locked up in NDAs and all that kind of wild stuff, but here are two clients you can talk to. One, I delivered a full stack web application for them. They're super happy with the product. The other one, I did X, Y, and Z for them. And so I can give you their contact information if you would like that. But yeah, over the past 10 years, I've had a very fruitful freelancing career. It's been very impactful. It's something that I wouldn't take away for the world. But I'm tired of the grind. I'm tired of hustling for new clients. I'm ready to move on to a product team where I can go deep with one product and not always be picking up new ones with different clients, right? That's it. You say that and they have people that they can talk to, it's over. It doesn't matter how big your gap is. I just talked my way out of a 10-year gap, right? NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. Means that you sign something that where you're not going to speak about the terms of the deal, right? And so when people say like, Leon, I've had bad experiences with gaps in my resume before, because you didn't do it right. And I don't want to. There's nothing I can say. Like, I'm sorry that comes off a little on the tooth, but it's true. I've had dozens of students with huge gaps in their resume that we have to drill. The thing I just did off the dome. Right? The thing I just did off the dome, imagine if you drilled it for hours and you tweaked it and you got better at it. And then when you showed up, you talked your talk, right? That was like that sounded pretty smooth, right? That sounded pretty good. It's not that I'm just great off the cuff. It's that I've literally helped students through this a dozen times, right? A dozen times. And that's why it sounds good when it comes out, right? But if I had time to think about it, to have better examples, to have real clients, it's a wrap. I'm passing that sniff test, right? I'm passing that sniff test and I'm going to the next round. So yeah, that's how we explain the gaps. And Tuesday, we're doing our How to Freelance class. Super excited. It's always probably my top 3 classes of the cohort, because it's when you start to realize your skills have value. You're going to get real paid clients. I love it. Morning games. Yeah. Could we add this boot camp or cohort in the education or experience part of a resume? No. You don't want to ever talk about a boot camp as a boot camp. Remember, you're trying to show up and they not really know that you went to a boot camp, because you don't want to have that boot camp smell on you. Boot camper smell, because most boot camps, students do all the same projects. They don't do any original work and they all graduate without real skills. That's the truth for most boot camps. It's absolutely not the truth for 100 devs. By the time you graduate 100 devs, you will have real paid clients. You will have 100 hours project that was entirely your own from beginning to end. And all the projects that we do together or in teams, you made your own and individualized and pushed, right? Look on Twitter, look at all the things people have been doing, right? And so when you come out of 100 devs, you have real skills and you have the ability to get a job, but you have to realize that other boot campers didn't put in the work that you put in or will put in. And so we got to make sure that we don't really get lumped in with folks that aren't willing to put in the effort. So we talk about 100 devs as an agency. And so you'll put it on your resume as an agency, you'll talk about it as an agency. And then when people press you, you say it's an agency with a training program. But we're not there yet. We're not really ready to start kind of building out our LinkedIns and resumes yet. When we get further in, we'll talk more about that. I'll give you example resumes. I'll give you example LinkedIns. I'll give you the exact words to put on your resume, the exact words to put on your LinkedIn, all that fun stuff. Yeah. Page buddy, I'm distinguished faculty at General Assembly. I don't know what you're talking about. Taught there for 10 years. I did not see the Pokemon Direct yet. I saw somebody posted it in the Ask Leon channel. Was it good? Did they announce a main series game? Don't spoil anything, but did they announce a new main series? Miss Ruby, yeah, folks that graduate will be able to use us as references. Yeah. They did? All right, cool. Dope. What do you feel beginners struggle the most with when learning JavaScript? So it always comes down to the big 3, right? The big 3 that we talked about are managing your frustration, being consistent, and taking care of yourself, right? And so the thing that people struggle with the most is that they don't manage their frustration when they first start learning JavaScript, right? You come in hot, you think that everything has to click within the first 2 or 3 classes. You don't give yourself enough grace to actually do the process of typing it out, deleting it, redoing it. For some folks, they feel like that's a waste and that's not gonna be the way they're actually gonna learn. They don't believe it. They don't trust that part of the process. Their frustration starts to build. Nothing's making sense. The Legos all look weird. The syntax looks weird. And then they quit. That's it. And it really had nothing to do with their aptitude. It really had nothing to do with their ability to learn, but had everything to do with managing their frustration. Because most people, like a lot of people, I'm not gonna say most people, but a lot of people quit the first week of JavaScript. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing. I've taught this for 10 plus years, but the people that quit typically quit within like the first 2 weeks of JavaScript. Like how are you only going to give yourself 2 weeks to learn a brand new language? And it's because there's a lot of real deep-seated fears that come out when learning how to code. A lot of folks might not have been successful in traditional learning. A lot of folks might have some real hangups when it comes to learning new material. And when they get into the thick of it and they're seeing how hard it's going to be, they can see how clear that trough of sorrow is going to be, right? They just quit. They just say to themselves, I'm not gonna be able to manage the frustration for that long, and they're out. And so managing that frustration is something that you need to figure out in even that very first couple of classes. You need to be able to give yourself that grace, that room to say, you know what, I'm going to give myself a month on this, right? To really plug along, to really invest in the process. And part of that process, right, is being consistent. I've asked all of y'all for every single thing that we did for homework to delete it, redo it, delete it, redo it, delete it, redo it, right? Some folks aren't going to do that. Or they're going to start chunking, right? As the material starts to get harder, they just do it on Saturday, or they just do it on Tuesday and Thursday, like with class time. They're not finding consistent time throughout the week, every single day. Consistency is every day. They start to slide on their Anki. They start to slide a little bit on the reading. They start to, it's a progression, right? So the biggest thing we talked about was this idea of, if you have the privilege to continue into a program, right? Not everyone has the privilege to go through a boot camp, to have the time that it takes to commit to a boot camp. But if you do, you can't let these things slide. You can't let the Anki slide. You can't let the repetition slide. You can't let the taking care of yourself slide, right? Double Dizzle said, deleting, redoing is literally blow my mind. It's sinking in so much faster. Yeah, because the repeating in the beginning is just because the syntax is so new and odd looking and you don't know where the pieces connect. That repetition process, it gives you the idea of like how pieces come together. Yeah. Yeah. And so give yourself some room, give yourself some time. If you were learning if you were learning Japanese or Spanish or a new language for the very first time, you wouldn't be a week or 2 weeks in going, I'll never get this. No, millions and millions of people are fluent in those languages. It's not an aptitude thing. It's not an ability thing. It's a consistency and a managing frustration thing. Bam said, I just need an alarm that tells me to get off your blank every hour, your butt every hour. Yeah, I mean, Pomodoro, right? It should be that. Pomodoro should be sitting on your butt for a small portion of time and working for another portion of time. Some people really don't like Pomodoro. Some people really don't invest in early enough. Pomodoro will really make this consistency and taking care of yourself portion of the bootcamp way easier, right? Because it literally gives you permission to fuck off, right? Like you put in your, I don't know what your blocks are. You put in a half-hour block of time, and then you can just go do whatever the heck you want for your 15-minute block or 5-minute block of free time. And really, really hold yourself to doing free time. Go play a video game for 5 minutes or read a book for 5 minutes. Like do something that like really removes you from the coding that you're doing. Yeah. Black and Stub, what are you having a hard time understanding from the task? Yeah. So Pomodoro will change a lot for you. I never work without doing Pomodoro. I've been trying out a newer app called Forest, which is pretty cool. It's a Pomodoro timer, but you grow trees. And so the more like you're focused on your Pomodoro, the faster your trees grow. But if you like try and use your phone, you kill your tree. So for folks that have a hard time like not focusing on their phone, right? That could be fun. And then like you get like credits while you're doing the Pomodoro timer, and with those credits you can actually like plant real trees. It's pretty dope. It's free on Android. I don't know what I think it might be paid on iOS, but yeah. Oh, we had a hydrate. Court V, thank you so much for the hydration. Cheers to you. I need to up that hydration amount. Leon, we were talking about arrow functions and function expressions. Yeah, probably on Thursday. The app is called Forest, like a forest of trees. I work for 5 minutes and take a break for 4 hours. Hey, that's how I started. I started 1 minute on, 59 minutes off. I had severe attention issues when I first started, kind of like getting serious about learning. And it took me a long time to build up my Pomodoro to be like where I'm 30 on, right? And then 30 off. And then the next big jump was 45 on, 15 off. That's kind of where I'm sitting these days. Anime Dora is also a big thing these days. Anime Dora is 30 minutes of work followed by an anime episode, and that's people have been doing. It's been pretty cool to see. Yeah, but a lot of folks underestimate or overestimate how much time they can actually focus for. And you got to be real with yourself. A lot of folks don't have a solid 30 minutes of focus right out the gate. I normally see most people's focus around 15 minutes. I think that's where most folks without kind of outside kind of things impacting them, they have about a really strong 15 minutes and then like a week, another 10, and then like 5 where it's just not sinking in. And so I actually tell most people to start with like 15 minutes on just to make sure you can solidly focus for those 15 minutes and 15 off, and then kind of growing up over that. Yeah. But that's where most folks kind of start to peter out. Yeah. And you really want to get to where you're at least at 20 minutes, because that's kind of like it's kind of like this idea of like encoding something called flow, where eventually things just start making sense and you're going. But most projects take like harder challenges can take up to 20 minutes for your brain to fully wrap around what's being asked. So you really do need that 20 minutes of focus when we get into things like coding challenges and stuff like that. Yeah, that's a good point too. Even if you can focus for hours, burnout is real. Exactly. The Pomodoro is not just for when things are going wrong; it's for when things are going well too. If you're really humming along and really focusing on those 30-minute sessions, you still need to be taking your breaks. We're in this for the rest of your life. Remember, just because it's fingers on keyboards and mental doesn't mean that you're not putting in a lot of activity. No. All right, let's look at the next one here. Will we learn how to create APIs in this cohort? Absolutely. So in maybe like 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be consuming APIs. Like 2 weeks, yeah. We'll be consuming APIs, and then you'll eventually build your own, which is pretty cool. So like we'll learn how to use APIs, consume APIs, and then eventually when we get the back end, the first thing we do is build an API. So an API is an application programming interface. It's a way of doing something simple that does something complex, right? So a lot of times you hear APIs in terms of like getting stuff. So there's like a Pokemon API where I just ask for a Pokemon and it returns a Pokemon to me, or I ask for a Pokemon that's grass type and it returns Bulbasaur to me. So I did something very simple, like ask for a Pokemon, and then something complex happens. Like a request went to a server, the server checked all of its data, it found all the grass type Pokemon, it grabbed Bulbasaur and returned it to me. But don't worry about that for now. We're not anywhere near there. He said, Leon, do you recommend accountability buddies? I don't recommend accountability buddies. I think smaller groups can be helpful, but everyone's different. For me, an accountability buddy, like when I've seen students do it, it seems to turn lopsided or one-sided, where one person's dragging the other or the other's dragging the other person. I think it's very rare to find someone that you really groove with and that can go at your pace and that you're not slowing one person down or the other. So I think groups are typically a bit better, and that's why we put you in study communities, because with a study community, there are some people that are going to be going your pace 1 week, but then other folks that'll be going your pace the next. And so you want to make sure that you are going at a clip that is comfortable and constantly pushing for yourself. And so I think that's why groups are slightly better, but everyone's different. And so I have some students that have done really well with it, but it's just not something that I've seen really work out at scale. Yeah. Yeah, OCC said, I find accountability buddies who are like me and have ADHD, but we both forget to do work. Study community means at least one person is usually on task. Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Uh, if you use JS to animate the page, how do you feel about CSS animation? So I don't really use JavaScript to animate a page. I use JavaScript to listen for clicks or events, and then I let CSS do the animation. Yeah, so I'll add a class that'll make it spin, right? You can do animations in CSS. So I use CSS animations. It's just those animations are triggered via JavaScript. So JavaScript will hear a click or some other event, and then CSS will handle the moving and all the animation stuff. So yeah, that's how I do it. Mhm. Yeah, and we'll probably do like an office hours where we do CSS animations. Once we get a little bit further into JavaScript, just because they're pretty cool and I think they're fun. Is that to prevent the page from getting heavy? It's more of like a separation of concerns issue. Yeah. Like, is that movement style? Right. So kind of it's a question to ask yourself. I've been joining voice chats, just sitting in and listening. It's been helpful to getting out of my shell. Everyone is so friendly. Hey, there we go. There's some really cool JS animation libraries. There are. Yeah. Cool. Will you go over Flex again? Yeah, like I said, I want to do like a full like I've planned out the class and it's sitting at 4 hours. Normally my classes sit at 4 and then I have to like figure out what gets taken away to get to 3. But I don't think we're gonna be able to take it away. So I want to have like a full Sunday session where we go through a lot of layouts with floats and flex, and then a little bit of grid. And I want to incorporate a little bit of JavaScript in those as well. Like when we get to mobile, having like a hamburger menu that you can click and it like slides open and stuff like that. And so that's just going to take more time than I realistically have today. So it's something I've been trying to plan out, but probably next Sunday. I might even do a different day just because we might need the time. But yeah, so that's the goal. We're going to do more flex. We're going to do more layout stuff. We're going to do a little bit of grid. And eventually, once we learn a lot of JavaScript, we start having larger projects where you have to do the front end, right? So you'll have larger projects where you have to do the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript, and then connect it to a back end with Node, right? So the deeper we get, the more it becomes the more you have to do, the bigger the projects become. Right now they're just front end, right? But eventually they get bigger and bigger, and you're doing not only the front end, but that's only a small part of the overall project. That's when it gets fun. The moment you realize you can build something from beginning to end is a really glorious day. It's one of my favorite, like when I used to be in meet space with real students, like seeing them complete those projects is thrilling. It's just like something clicks in your brain and you go, you know what, any website I see I could probably build, and that's a huge place to be. Yeah. Can we have a short lesson on how to properly Google or search questions we have for JavaScript, i.e. how to properly word what we're searching for? This is a good question. In the beginning, it's hard to Google, but you get better at it. And so the really isn't like there are like things you can do that like make Googling better or easier for you, but it's more a filtering out what is not relevant. It's actually not even how to Google. It's getting good at filtering out stuff that you know is not going to work. And the only way that you get better at that is by doing it and trying it. And that's where I really emphasize this idea of playing with your code, right? Playing with things. Because when I Google something, I DuckDuckGo stuff, right? When I DuckDuckGo something and I get taken to a Stack Overflow page, my skill is not in grabbing the right code. My skill is in voiding the code that I know won't help me. And in the beginning, you don't have that sense. And so what you do is you try it. You take the code that you think might work, you put it into your code base, it doesn't work. And instead of getting frustrated and being like, it doesn't work, you just go right back to the Stack Overflow and you go to the next answer, copy and paste it. And eventually you start to build up this habit. So you'll Google something. You'll go to Stack Overflow. You won't even read the person's question on Stack Overflow. That's the biggest waste of time. You're just going to go straight to the answers, bangers only, and start looking at the answer and go, that's close enough to my code. Or no, I don't think that'll work. And then like you start pulling it out, right? And so the Googling is really not like, here's my tips and tricks for Googling. It's really, I've been in the muck for so long that I know what's going to get me dirty and what's going to help me stay clean, right? That's kind of the idea there. And so when you're first kind of Googling, right? When you're first Googling, just make sure you're putting the word JavaScript in it and try and be descriptive. Always check your console. If there's any errors, plug those errors like word by word into Google. Yeah. Dacer 4 said, and you start to learn which sites are more reliable. Yeah, you'll start to realize like which ones will help you and which ones won't. Yeah. So in the beginning, throw everything into Google. Make sure you're looking at your errors. Make sure you're putting those into Google. Make sure you're putting the word JavaScript in there, and then it's just experience. It's being in the trenches. And you'll see me like in class, like you'll see me in class doing, I know I did a couple, I think it was Tuesday where I Googled some stuff, but you'll see me because everything doesn't stay in your brain, right? You're going to see me in class, have to like, how do I do this? How do I like trying to recall how I do things? And so we'll see it together too. What's for dinner? I'm not sure. Not sure yet. Sunday's always a wild card. What are some tips on how to stay informed on programming language updates to prevent using old standards? Is there a website or a newsletter? Not really. You can follow people on Twitter. You can follow people like, I think Twitter is the easiest. Twitter and Reddit make up probably the bulk of my like staying on top of stuff. But then I also listen to podcasts as well. So Syntax FM and Shop Talk Show, which is, yeah, it's been around for a long time. So I think just through like a normal media habit of like Twitter, YouTube, like Twitter and like those podcasts, I'm pretty like up to date on like what's happening in the development world. But you're not talking about like these like huge changes. You're going to know when these changes take effect, right? Like if you are on the job, it's kind of part of your job to like know release schedules for stuff and like when things are going to change. And so like if you're on Node, you know when updates are going to happen to Node. With JavaScript, it's kind of the same thing. Like when they introduce the new specification, as long as you're kind of like alive, you'll typically hear about it, and the stuff doesn't get implemented right away. So you can go a while without having to worry about implementing stuff. But for me, Twitter, Reddit, and a couple podcasts keep me kind of in the loop as to what new changes are coming. And in class, we're going to cover the difference between like the older versions of, say, JavaScript and the newer versions of JavaScript. You heard me a couple times say ES6 Plus. We haven't really covered what that is yet, but we'll talk about it in class too. Yeah. also I will be starting to do short form content. That's a good plug. Where I'm going to be covering a lot of that smaller stuff that I don't think is like necessarily worthwhile to bake into class, but more so here's what's happening in tech. And so a lot of that short form content will be on TikTok and YouTube Shorts for now. Yeah, that's kind of the reason why I want to do short form content, is to do stuff that I don't think is necessarily worthwhile to bake into class as it's happening. But I definitely want to put it out there. Yeah. Is there a failsafe in case I accidentally make an infinite loop? No. Well, Chrome kind of stops it now, but other browsers might not. For our projects, have we been using ES6? For the most part, yes. There's some stuff that I've showed you some old stuff, some new stuff, and then I like to kind of give you blocks to play with first, and then reveal what blocks you're playing with. For free, absolutely. What's with the hate on W3 schools? They used to be wildly incorrect, like horribly wrong. Like just the simplest things they got wrong. And they stole their name from another really respected organization. And so for the longest time, people like did not like them. They kind of cleaned up their act a little bit, but some people still hold on to the grudge. No, Helly, it's Learn with Leon. Yeah. What does the process look like when a portfolio or resume review is redeemed with channel points? You send me a mod mail and then we find a time to meet and go over it. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Send a mod mail, we go over it together. That's it. Right now it's set to where you can use your channel points to redeem a portfolio review or a resume review. When you redeem it, you should be ready to do those things, and you can there's only like a couple that can be redeemed per class. Yeah. What is the Thunderdome 1v1? It's where we stop whatever we're doing and we play a game. It's a 1v1 challenge. So I think right now it's set up for Smash. So we play 3 stocks of Smash to see who wins, and if you win, you get VIP. Yeah, that's what Thunderdome is. Why would you use plus plus instead of plus equals or plus equals 1? It's up to you. It's personal preference. We saw some quirks of what each does. And so if you want control on the increment separate from the execution of the line, you might use something slightly different. But that's code weenie talk. It just doesn't matter at this point in your time. Like, just do whatever you want to do, plus plus or plus equals 1, whatever makes more sense in your brain. There are always like very subtle nuances between all these things, but it's just not worth investing time into. Yeah. Next question. Someone said, we talk about gaps in a resume, but what about no gaps, but a completely different industry like construction? It's kind of the same process. We have a formula here, and it's a formula that honestly really works, right? So the idea is that there has to be something in your past career that brought you up to that kept you connected to tech, or something that you hated about your industry that you think could be solved with tech, right? So if you're in construction, right? I don't know what level of construction you're in, but like you say, hey, one of my biggest gripes about construction, right? I was in construction for 10 years of my life. I loved it. I'm a person that loves to do hard work and use my hands and be creative. Is one of the things I love the most about coding, is that creative hard work aspect of it. But while I was doing construction, we were always going on job sites, and people would always be late or not show up that day, and certain jobs required a certain number of people. And so this problem always came up. It was always a big drag on our productivity. And I said to myself, you know what, there has to be a better way to keep our kind of coworkers coming to the sites, or knowing when folks are coming to sites, or being able to backfill folks showing up to a site. And so I started to teach myself code. I built a web application that helps people register to sign up for different sites, and also sends out text messages to folks on our backup list for whenever we're short on a job site. And so this really kind of changed the game for me while I was in the construction business, and that really spawned this idea that I could use code to do amazing stuff. Left construction as my engineering skills came to fruition. I joined an agency. I started freelancing, and I've been freelancing for the past 10 years or so, and past year or so, and now I'm ready to join a product team where I can focus on one product, grow, and hopefully have a product that brings as much joy as that original project in construction brought me to others. Right? Like, there's always something, right? There's always a way, and it's all about crafting a story to get there. Right? And so it doesn't matter if you have a gap, doesn't matter if you don't have a gap, because remember, people just don't care. Here's the thing, people just don't care. It's a sniff test. They want to see if they can hand you off to the nerds. They're going to evaluate whether or not you can code. Engineering is completely different than any, like most other careers, because you can either do it or not do it, right? People can finesse their ways into other jobs, but if you can't code, you're going to be kind of lost in the sauce very quickly on the job. And so everything's about passing a sniff test to get to the engineers that can evaluate whether or not you can code. And those engineers don't really care about your background. And when I say this is a numbers game, I really mean it, because nothing is in absolutes, right? There are always going to be some companies that have weird requirements or don't like you. You look funny that day. They just don't care. And so you don't care about those companies. You move on. It's 1 out of 60, right? 60 well networked applications, right? And some of them are going to go your way, some of them are not going to go your way, but if you do all 60, you get a job. Oh wow. All right. Will I have the knowledge to build someone a small clothing shop in less than a month? Yes, because you're not going to build it from scratch. A clothing shop, you're going to use something off of the shelf. You're going to use Shopify or Squarespace or one of those platforms where they can integrate their inventory and do sales way easy. So you're not going to do any of that stuff from scratch. And that's always a hang up people have. They're like, Leon, like if they should just be using Squarespace or Wix or Shopify, like why do they need me? Because they're running a business and they don't want to have to figure out how to make a CSS tweak, even though it's a fully custom platform. Like it just like people pay to not have to do, right? Because they have so many other things in their business they have to worry about. It's worth the value of paying an expert to deal with it so they can troubleshoot all the small issues. They're not sitting trying to figure those things out, right? They pay you to deal with it. And the thing other people get hung up on is they're like, Leon, somebody said and asked Leon, I don't know how I could ever charge over $1,000. $1,000 is so peanuts, right? Because we got to realize is people aren't paying you to do a project. They're paying you for the hundreds, thousands of hours it took you to know how to do that project, right? They're not paying you for the act of like fingers on keyboard. They're paying you for all the hard nights, the weekends, the Sundays you spent getting up early or staying up late to learn this material, right? That's what they're paying for. It has nothing to do with you actually coding. They don't want to have to put in the time, the hours, right? To understand how CSS works, to understand how HTML works, to understand how JavaScript works, just so they can do a button, right? It just doesn't make sense. And so that's what you're getting paid for. Are we supposed to be using all the practice assignments on our portfolio? No. You're not going to put really any of the practice assignments on your portfolio because they smell like boot camp assignments, The only thing that goes into your portfolio or your resume are projects that look like projects you would have done for another client. If your projects do not look like they were done for a client, they do not go in your portfolio. They do not go in your resume. No calculators, no weather apps, no bullcrap that looks like they came out of a boot camp. Now, it doesn't mean you can't take a simple project and bend it into something that's really impactful or meaningful, right? We had someone that I retweeted on Twitter that took the stuff that we learned and made a soundboard to help one of their children, right? Like, that's an impactful project that should probably go in your portfolio or resume, but you don't need these other things that look too simple. And by the end of your time here at 100 devs, you will have freelancing clients that people paid you for. 100 hours projects, the project you sunk 100 hours into. You'll have machine learning projects. You'll have all these things that stand out and help you pass the sniff tests, right? That don't look like a normal boot camper's resume or portfolio. Leon, should I join a web dev hackathon before getting good at the MERN stack? It's up to you. There's always stuff to be done, right? As long as you're honest at a hackathon, like, hey, I'm not really great at code, but I can write really good documentation, or I'm really good at JavaScript. Let me handle the JavaScript, or I can do the copy, right? There are some teams at hackathons that value like the copy, the design, stuff like that. It's up to you. Are we supposed to be doing all the tasks for the GitHub reading as well? If there's ever tasks to be done, yeah, do the tasks. Yeah. Whenever you see tasks, do the tasks. When is a good time to backfill with fundamental CS knowledge? I know this is a jobs program, but I'm interested in more than just web dev. When you have a job and someone's paying you to learn, that's the only time it makes sense. Yeah. Once someone's paying you, go wild, backfilling all the education that you want. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But all that stuff is just a distraction until you're on the job. And then once you're on the job, there's probably other things that you'll want to focus on first. But yeah. And backfilling is a weird word. Like, you don't like, you're not missing out on a lot. A lot of people spend 4 years covering stuff that they'll never use ever. So get in the field, have someone paying you, and then narrow in on the field that you want. Hey Leon, regarding the paid client by 329, are we going to talk about what we deliver to the client, or do we just provide HTML, CSS, files, hosting? We're going to talk about how to freelance on Tuesday's class, so we'll cover that in detail. But it's you're providing whatever the client needs, right? So a lot of times when I work with clients, they need stuff that I cannot do, right? When I take on client work, a lot of times I take on client work that I can't do. In that instance, what I become is a project manager. I do the bits that I'm really good at, and then I hire other people to do the bits that I'm not good at, right? So it really does not matter what the client needs, as long as you have enough room in the budget to bring on the people that you know that you need to do those pieces. So you can handle everything from a basic website all the way to a huge web application, right? We've had lots of students that have gotten really high budget clients, and then they've brought on other engineers to work with them. Yeah, but we'll talk more about that on Tuesday's class on freelancing. Hippie, I don't really use any hosting that's not free out the gate. My hosting really boils down to like Netlify and Heroku and maybe some AWS here or there. There's really nothing else I would ever advocate my clients being on, honestly. How do we find open source projects? We're going to talk about it in class. Yeah. It's one of the other things you could do if getting a client is not something that you can realistically do due to visas or things like that. Yeah, we'll talk about that in class. But yeah, there's plenty of open source projects. You can look up First Timers Only, which lists really great projects that are open for new folks. Yeah. Do you lock your client website to make sure you get paid? No. They pay a deposit of 50% up front. When I hit the middle milestone, I get paid the next 25%. And then I show them the code running on my server. It looks great. They sign off on it, and then I transfer it to their hosting. So they never have the code or the site until they've paid me in full. And then even once they've paid me in full, they have a universal, irrevocable license to it. So it's still my content. They just have a universal, individual license to it. That way I can use it in my portfolio. I can use it on like showing to other clients. Yeah. We'll talk all about that on Tuesday though. Yeah. And Leon, why you do it that way? Because I've been burned doing it the other way. Most of the time my clients have no idea about hosting, so I pick the host for them and set them all up. What do you do if you don't have a server? You get a server. Yeah, plenty of free ones to start off with. For basic front end code, it'll go up on Netlify. For anything more complex, typically Heroku. How important is solving a LeetCode challenge? It can open more doors for you, but I would say about half the folks that got jobs last cohort didn't have technical interviews. That's why this story crafting, this like idea of like being really good at the soft stuff is really important. Folks are asking a lot of freelancing questions. Come back on Tuesday. We'll talk all about them. We'll be touching on how to build mobile apps. Nah, it's not what we focused on. But the cool thing is with the skills you have, you can just use React Native and build some really great mobile apps. Yeah. So you'll have the skills to build mobile apps if you want. It's just not something we focus on. Won't help you get a job quicker. Does coffee chat have to be over video? I've been meeting and chatting to software engineers via text for one. I've been talking with them for several weeks. Yeah, you want coffee chats to happen over video. Text is okay, but you want to build a connection with someone. You want to be able to interact with them. So unless there's something preventing you from doing like a face-to-face call, I would. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm a fan of face-to-face calls. Getting used to talking with other engineers, because it's one, it is like networking, but it's two, it's also just getting you comfortable with the idea of talking to other engineers. You're all about to go on to teams with so many different people, and the way that you feel more comfortable joining a team with 10 different people on the engineering team is that you've been having talks with engineers for months beforehand. Right? If you're just doing via text and then you join a team and then immediately you're like on Zoom with 10 other people talking fast and they're throwing out all these buzzwords, well, you're just not prepared for that. So yeah, the networking is like twofold. It's building your network so you can get a job, but it's also like getting you comfortable with the idea of talking to engineers so that when you're on the job, you're good. Can you explain the common job titles that software engineers will be interacting with and what they do big picture? Basically tie together PM, QA, DevOps, etc. Sure. So most teams have a mix of people, and so each company is organized in a different way, but the folks that you might run into on a team would be a project manager or product manager, depending what company you're at. These are the people that like separate your team from the rest of the business. so that you don't have to deal with any of the rest of the company's bullshit. You just get to focus on what your team focuses on. So the product manager is like your connection to the outside rest of the company, and can sometimes help with the direction of like the thing that you're working on. You'll typically also have like an engineering manager or a team lead that's helping set the technical direction of the thing that you're working on. Every company's different. Sometimes PMs do a little bit more. Sometimes you have a technical PM, but like that's kind of the idea. Like PMs help set the vision for the team, connect you to the rest of the org. Team lead is like someone's going to help set the technical direction for the project that maybe the PM has put on the plate. Then you have DevOps, she said. So DevOps is like after the engineers are done writing code, how does that code go live, right? So everything from engineers being done writing code to that code being live and having scalable systems like for your serving of that code is what DevOps would do. QA is like when the engineers are done, like, and it goes into like a testing server, right? Or however you have it set up. Like, are there bugs? Are there things there? Are there issues with the code before you send it live? So you could think about it as like PM, team lead, like setting direction or like interfacing with outside orgs, engineers writing code. That code, when they're done, will get put on some sort of testing server by DevOps. Then the QA team can like play with it, make sure there's no breaking stuff. If there's breaking stuff, they send it back to the engineers. If it's all good, then it goes live, and that's something that DevOps handles. So that's kind of a quick overview, since you asked for a quick overview. But we'll spend way more time on this later on in program. We'll eventually have like 1 or 2 weeks where you work only in teams. And we're going to talk about the agile methodology. We're going to talk about Scrum. We're going to talk about all these different things before you actually start working in your team and putting those practices into place. When we start to learn Git in a couple weeks. I don't like to introduce it early. It's too confusing for most people. It doesn't really have too much of a value add early on in when you're first starting out. Once we start building real meaty projects, we need to use Git and GitHub. Or yeah, we use GitHub, but alrighty. Let's look through these real quick. I said we were gonna do a power hour, so let's see if there's any good questions left, and then we're gonna do a raid. Alrighty. If job description, so we're gonna do 5 more, and then we'll do our raid. Yeah, 5 more, and then we'll do our raid. Yep, short stream, power hour today. If the job description has a lot of requirements and skills we haven't learned, should we apply anyway or try and learn them first? You apply anyway. Don't let requirements stop you from applying. But remember, we do not apply. We never apply. We're straight referrals. We're networking our way into a job. So if you're networking your way into a job, the barriers they set up just don't matter, right? So it just doesn't matter. So yeah, don't let requirements stop you. So many of our students, like if you read the Celebrations channel, so many students applied to jobs that had nothing to do with their current skill set, had nothing to do with what they learned. They wind up getting senior titles. It just doesn't matter. Don't let these barriers stop you from getting things that you want, because it just doesn't matter. It's all about passing a sniff test, and you will be able to pass that sniff test by the end of this program. What motivates you to pursue? Oh, that's a question from me. What makes you want to do this instead of gunning for Fang? Because I mean, this is way better than working at Fang. If I use Squarespace to build someone a website, am I creating them a Squarespace account, or do I build it on Squarespace under my name? You can transfer on a lot of these platforms. You can transfer from one account to another. So that's what you would do. When you need to secure a domain name for a freelance client, how does the process work? You typically will have the client buy the name, and then they give me access to their account. But we'll talk about that on Tuesday. It's not really something that like we have to worry too much about. Yeah, they'll buy the domain. They'll buy their own hosting if they need to spend money on it, which they probably won't. And then once everything is good, you put it on your testing server. And then once they sign off on everything, you transfer it over to their hosting, their domains, all that stuff. At this stage, how should I represent myself at meetups, coffee chats? Example, I'm studying to be a full stack developer, or I like to meet mentors in tech. No, both of those are hot. Don't do that. Hi, I'm a early career software engineer. I'm really interested in kind of learning JavaScript and more front end stuff at the moment. That's it. Don't oversell yourself, but don't undersell yourself, right? Don't look for mentors, because that's how you find weird folks, right? Look for friends. Remember, make friends, not mentors. And you don't have to mention studying. Don't snitch on yourself. Hey, I'm an early career software engineer. Right now, I'm working on with some smaller freelancing clients, sharpening my JavaScript skills. Yeah. And then you try and make a friend. Doesn't matter if they're a principal engineer at a huge FANG company, or if they're just a normal. It just doesn't matter. You're there to make friends, right? All right. Considering functions, at what point do you know you're trying to do too much in one and need to nest it function, or need to assign variables to help expedite it? So eventually we'll get to a process where our functions really only do one thing. And once your functions start to do more than one thing, you probably need a different function, right? Yeah. Yeah. So for now, don't worry about that. Overload your functions, write the sloppiest of code, be a baddie, write bad code. But no, eventually that our functions will probably like narrow down to doing one thing. And then you just have a lot of functions. I went to a career event a couple days ago. What should I message to the recruiters? I felt unqualified when talking to them. Hey, I'm not currently looking for opportunities, but I will be in probably 2 to 3 months. Do we mind connecting then? That's it. They don't need to know that you're studying. They don't need to know that you're still learning. They just need to know that you're not currently looking for opportunities. So, hey, not looking for opportunities right now, but maybe in 2 to 3 months. And so in their mind, what they think is that you're still working, right? And then in 2 to 3 months, you might be open to opportunities. And that's when you reach back out to them. Oh, there's a... So people are kind of getting hung up on the friends, not mentors thing. Here's something I want you to read about that. This is from our own De Jesus or Nick. They have a really good blog post on seeking friends, not mentors, and how that can be really helpful for you. Not that mentors are bad. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's because I didn't put spaces. Yeah, it was because I didn't put spaces. But yeah, no, it's this idea that like in the beginning, you're there to make friends, you're there to network, right? And seek friends, not mentors. Read the post, and then you'll have a better idea what I'm saying. It's not that mentors are bad, that you shouldn't have mentors. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's just that you want to go into relationships as though you're equals, right? Don't seek out weird power dynamics. You're fine. You're good. You have value, right? You can provide value just as much as a mentor can provide value. Oh. Exactly. Don't undersell yourself. All right. I think this is what we're gonna call it today, folks. Thank you for doing the power hour with me. Next week we'll do a longer session. We'll cover more. I just wanted to make sure that we got some good questions in today. We did the hour together. Please, with the rest of your Sunday, you got maybe some time back. Please delete, retype, repeat. Delete, retype, repeat. Delete, retype, repeat. Please, if you know that you had like another hour that you were expecting to spend with us, do that. Please go back through. Make sure you're doing the deletion, the repeating, and I guarantee you'll start to unlock more stuff. Remember, you had these questions to do for homework, the variables, the functions, the conditionals. Make sure you get that in. Make sure you get the reading in, and then come ready on Tuesday to jump into networking. I'm super excited. It's one of my favorite classes. We're going to get you to the point where you're ready to start getting paid clients. Above all, y'all can do this. You have the power to do this. You have the skills to do this. Things will click. It will make sense. You'll get there. Delete, retype, repeat, folks. All right, buddy. Have a good rest of your Sunday. Really looking forward to seeing you next week. Let's go ahead and raid. We're going over to Lena Lux. Peace, everyone.